You ever kneel on hot gravel with a gun pressed to your temple while the guy holding it thinks he owns the law? Because that's how this whole mess started. A cracked highway shoulder in rural Georgia, 3 seconds of silence, and one smug cop who thought he'd cornered just another nobody. Except, the man on his knees wasn't a nobody. He was Judge Manuel Cortez. But see, on that morning, he wasn't wearing the robe, didn't have a gavel, didn't flash a badge or bring an entourage. No. He was just a grieving husband in a faded polo and khakis driving his late wife's old Ford to lay tulips on her grave like he did every July 9th. No speeding, no busted taillight, no attitude, just a man trying to remember a woman he'd lost too soon. And then came the red and blues. Sergeant Blake Riker strutted up like he was in a western thumb hooked on his holster toothpick rolling between his teeth. His partner rookie Marcus Neal looked fresh out of academy, nervous, quiet, already doubting. "What's a guy like you doing out here?" Riker sneered, peeking at the license. "Driving your dead wife's car through the wrong side of town?" Manuel kept calm. Hands at 10 and 2, voice low, steady. "Am I being detained, officer?" That's when it turned. Riker yanked open the door, said he smelled weed, said he had probable cause, but we all know what that means when you're black in a beige neighborhood. And then, like some bad cop drama, Riker planted a Ziploc bag under the seat, smiled like a kid caught cheating, and said, "Guess we got a problem, Judge." Only he didn't know Manuel was a federal judge. Not yet. See, Riker thought he'd just scored an easy stat, another made-up drug bust, another body for his precinct's quota wall, but he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. Because Judge Manuel Cortez wasn't just a legal scholar, he was forged in fire. Before the robe, before the courtroom, he was Sergeant Cortez, 3rd Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment, 2 tours in Kandahar, 1 in Fallujah, trained to endure heat, fear, humiliation, and remain calm under fire. He'd been blindfolded and waterboarded in SEER school. He'd seen friends blown apart by IEDs, stitched up his own leg with trembling hands while pinned behind a Humvee. And every time he learned to breathe, to wait, to strike only when it counted. So when Riker cuffed him and dragged him to the back of that squad car like he was trash, Manuel didn't panic. He didn't shout. He just waited for his one phone call. And when he got it, he made it count. Code Black. Echo 9 or 7. Immediate lockdown on Patrol Unit 312. That's all it took. Because 5 minutes later, while Riker was still bragging to dispatch about a drug collar, the precinct doors blew open. And in walked U.S. Marshal Dana Brooks and Deputy FBI Director Gabriel Hayes. The air shifted. Riker went pale. "You're holding a federal judge without cause," Dana said, eyes like daggers, "with planted evidence." What Riker stuttered. That guy's a judge." "No," Hayes growled. "He's your judge now." And just like that, the tide turned. The precinct erupted. Neal froze in the hallway, guilt pouring off him. Dispatch fell silent. Even the Lieutenant Old Man Rafferty backed into his office like he could disappear into the drywall. But this wasn't just about Riker. Because when Judge Cortez was extracted to a safe house and the dash cam footage secured, it wasn't just his story that came out. It was dozens. Hidden files. Gray folders with no digital trace. Complaints that mysteriously vanished. Body cam footage deleted or never turned on. Officers with years of misconduct swept under the rug. Chief Landon McCall. He knew. Hell, he trained them to keep it quiet. But here's the twist: they never counted on a man like Cortez. A man with nothing to prove but everything to protect. He could have walked away. Could have let the agencies handle it. Let the headlines fade. Let the system eat itself from the inside. But that's not how Judge Manuel Cortez was built. See, Manuel believed in pressure not to destroy, but to reveal. And what he saw under the surface of Oak Ridge PD was rot. So instead of going back to his chambers and closing the door, he stepped into the fire. Press conferences blew up across Georgia. National news anchors tossed around phrases like judicial misconduct and racial profiling scandal. But they didn't know the half of it. Because inside a locked federal room on the 12th floor, Manuel was building a war room. There were crime scene photos, complaint reports, post-it notes connecting dates and names. Marshal Brooks ran logistics. FBI Director Hayes coordinated surveillance. And in the middle of it all was Cortez. Not as a victim, not as a judge, but as a man refusing to let this happen to anyone else. And then came the first crack. Officer Marcus Neal, Riker's rookie partner, showed up at the federal building. Alone. Eyes bloodshot, hands shaking. "I'll testify," he whispered. "Not just about Riker, about McCall, about the files, about how we were told to stay quiet. It wasn't redemption, not yet, but it was a start, and it sparked a flood. A retired sergeant admitted to falsifying arrest records. A former precinct secretary revealed she was told to lose excessive force complaints from black families. Even the city clerk, a man named Vincent Lowe, confessed that hush money from asset forfeitures had made its way into local campaign funds, including the mayor's. The dominoes fell hard, and Riker, he cracked the minute he saw the indictment. Not in court, not in front of the press, but alone in his cell, sweating through his uniform, whispering into a recorder. That judge, the way he looked at me, like I wasn't even worth hating. Meanwhile, back in town, the reaction was nuclear. The community, they rallied. Marches through Oak Ridge with signs that read, "It could have been me," and badge immunity. Veterans, teachers, teens, even former cops marched in support. Local government. The mayor resigned. The city council scrambled. They tried to spin it, called it an isolated incident, blamed bad apples. But folks weren't buying it. Because when you dig up one rotten root, you don't stop. You tear out the whole damn stump. The police union. They issued a statement defending officer discretion. But then dash cam footage aired live footage of Riker dragging Cortez, shoving him, planting the drugs, and pointing a trembling weapon at a man already on his knees. The silence that followed was louder than any apology. And then came the courtroom. Day one, packed house. Reporters shoulder to shoulder. Students up in the rafters. Former precinct officers now sitting in the gallery, some as witnesses, some as defendants. And there at the center stood Judge Manuel Cortez, wearing a plain suit, no robe, no fanfare, just the weight of truth in his voice. When asked why he hadn't revealed his identity, he didn't flinch. "Because it shouldn't matter who I am," he said. "No one should need a title to survive a traffic stop." The room held its breath. Then the verdict came in. On planting evidence, guilty. On assault with a deadly weapon, guilty. On depriving civil rights under color of law, damn right guilty. And Riker didn't scream, didn't plead. He just sat there, stone-faced, like a man who finally saw the cliff he drove off. But this isn't where the story ends. Because after the trial, after the handcuffs, after the reporters stopped shouting his name, Judge Cortez sat alone in his office. He opened a letter. It was from a girl in Savannah, 15 years old. She wrote, "Dear Judge Cortez, my brother was killed in a traffic stop 5 years ago. We never got justice. But now when people ask me what hope looks like, I show them you. Thank you." Manuel folded it gently, slipped it into the pocket over his heart, then turned to the window. The city stretched out below, muffled, imperfect, still broken, but not silent. He whispered a name. Lucia. His wife. His anchor. Gone, but never far. And then, without fanfare, he picked up his robe, draped it over his arm, walked toward the bench. Because for Manuel Cortez, justice wasn't a title. It was a promise to the next man pulled over without cause, the next woman silenced in court, the next kid told their voice didn't matter. It was for them. And maybe for you too. So what do you think? Was justice served, or was this just the beginning? Drop your thoughts below, especially if you've ever felt powerless in front of a badge. Like, comment, and don't forget to share this story. Because silence is where corruption grows. And truth only lives when we dare to speak it.